Welcome to the podcast of the impossible. I'm Peter Wood, and my guests today are a magical duo on stage and off, messing with people's minds all across the globe. It's Jason and Stacy Alan. There we go. We got the dancing. Thank you both so much for being here with me today. I'm so excited to have you here. We're going to get into all sorts of stuff. We haven't sort of hung out since we both did Fool Us, season 7B, Once Upon a Time. And we can sort of talk about where we all connected originally, but I would love to sort of give, for folks who aren't familiar with you, kind of give the 30,000 foot magic origin story for both of you. I guess probably chronologically, that means starting with Jason, right?
Yes, sure.
All right.
Sure.
Well, I assume you got a magic kit when you were 7. It's the same story as everyone else, or do you have some variation on that?
Pretty much.
Okay. So Stacy,
no, that's not it. That's not it.
Okay.
I'll give you the quick one because I can talk forever about this. I had a grandmother that played cards all the time. She played poker all the time with her sisters and stuff, and so I would stay with her when I was, 7, 8 years old, and they taught me how to play cards. And so I became obsessed with that. And then when I got a little bit older, David Blaine seems like a common thread for a lot of magicians. David Blaine, I saw his first special. And at the same time, I saw a street performer in California. I was with my dad. And I became interested. I started to study a good bit. I was going to school. I went to college later in life and kind of put magic on the side. And one day I got paid to do a magic show and my GPA plummeted. And so I had no other option but to do magic if I wanted to make a living. But I've been interested in that. And around 22 or so, I became a professional.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. And I started to perform as a solo act. I worked cruise ships right away. And so I was doing cruise ships and comedy clubs and church events and biker events, everything all in between. Anything I could pick up. Kid shows.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
First kid show I ever had was for 300 kids, and they booed me before I walked on.
Oh man, was this all in like where? Tell us where you were growing up. Like what sort of region?
Sure. So we're from Ohio. We live in Ohio now, but this is near Youngstown. I grew up near Youngstown, Ohio. So I was kind of Northeast Ohio, Cleveland, Akron. I was picking up everything in between that I could find to kind of get an experience for it. And then one day I walked into a bar in Akron and I found the one woman that is obsessed with magic, and she hit on me.
She hit on you. Okay.
Yeah, I did. It's
okay.
True. It's true. So that was the short version of your story, I guess.
What's the long version?
The long version's on YouTube. It's on Penn and Teller Fool Us. I already saw the,
right. That's right. Yeah. So my story's a little different. Never in my life did I think that I would be a magician.
Sure.
Never. It still is funny to say out loud. And I've been doing it for over 9 years now. Yeah. So I actually went to school to be a mental health therapist. I have a master's degree. I was working in the field for 6+ years when I ran into Jason.
We didn't meet because she was my therapist.
No,
legally we have to say that.
No, I've never treated you for therapy. Right. But I was doing therapy when we met, and he was at a bar in the area that I lived in. You didn't live there. I was living towards Akron area, and he was visiting a friend. Okay. And if you watch our Penn and Teller video, you will learn more about that. But he really was trying to pick up the bartender. He says he wasn't, but he was. He was doing magic for her.
Okay.
He was very cute. Very likable, but
I was trying to get a free drink. That's all
I really like magic. Yeah, I really liked magic. So I never did it. Never did a card trick in my life at this point. Just watched a lot of it. Watched David Blaine, all of that stuff. So I had him do a trick for me. Okay. And we hung out every day for a week until you left on a ship again. And then we got engaged a year later.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I started assisting him. Carrying your stuff. I was basically his roadie.
It sounds terrible.
No,
sounds terrible.
No, I mean, yeah, I understand, but
sure.
Okay. I helped him, load in and out of shows. I went to shows for support. Obviously, I enjoyed watching him do his thing. And then slowly I started assisting you here and there.
No, it's not true at all.
Oh.
She did a trick one time.
We're gonna have you on 2 separate episodes. Like I'm just gonna have the Jason one and just the Stacy one,
right?
and then
I think you need to.
we'll see. We'll compare.
She did a trick at a party that I was being paid for.
Oh, okay.
And said, "You're good, but she is much better." It destroyed my life, and it was.
Yeah, and then he hired us for another hour. And I did this one trick repeatedly, which is like every magician's nightmare.
Sure.
So
right.
It's the only one I knew.
So wait, you at this gig, you were there, Stacy, just sort of as roadie, or had you come knowing?
Hanging out. It was just it was a private social party, and Jason was doing some close-up magic.
Okay.
Background and stuff. Stacy was coming into the act, and we were trying to find a spot for her.
Mm-hmm.
For people that don't know a lot about magic, there's different areas. I mean, there's close-up magic because people do card tricks. You were doing like a sponge ball routine. Mm-hmm. It was not matching. Like
it just didn't match my character and who I was as a person.
Okay.
So I started learning some mentalism. Jason shared.
I taught her a way to get a word. Business. I don't know how much info we want to get.
Yeah. But Jason taught me a mentalism trick.
Okay.
A close-up mentalism trick. And I really hadn't done it for anyone other than him. And at this party, when this gentleman said, well, what does she do?
Right.
Oh, she has something she can do. And I was not prepared to do this at all. This has been a theme in my career where Jason will just say, Stacy can go do that.
Sure.
And then I do it. But so I did it, and I was really nervous. But it went well.
He hired us for
he hired us for an extra hour. And so from that point on, I started learning more things to do in our actual show than just assist. I started taking on roles of doing my own pieces in the show or being in a full piece with Jason versus just taking things on and off stage.
That makes sense. And also, I mean, yeah, if you're already going to be there anyway, and you can sort of bill it as a double act, then you might as well. That tracks. Yeah. And I'm also glad to hear that the one trick you were doing, like at least with mentalism, if you were doing just like a SpongeBall sleight of hand thing over and over and over again, you're doing the exact same thing, but at least people are picking different words, and you can sort of play with how you're feeding that, letting them know that you figured that out. So that's fun.
Yeah, it was fun and terrifying all at the same time.
Sure. I mean, it's funny. So Jason keeps throwing you into the deep end, but then you keep proving him right. So I think it's like you both are to blame for this, in my opinion.
It's trial by fire. It goes back to me having 300 kids boo me before I even did a trick.
Right.
Like, if I'm going to get booed, Stacy's going to get booed.
That's probably good. Yeah. Do you know why, back to Jason, do you know why they were booing you before you even started, or?
I think something happened ahead of time. So I'll give you the whole context of the story.
Sure.
I got hired to do a thing at the Cleveland Zoo here, and
it's a really big event called
which I did not know
Boo
at the
at
time.
the Zoo.
I had no idea at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
All I knew is I had to show up and do 25 minutes of material, and I went down the street and borrowed an amplifier from a friend, a speaker, because I had no sound equipment. And I'm like, there's going to be 30 kids at most. There's not going to be like it. So I go in, and they had like a tent set up where then lights in my eyes. This is all outdoors. Yeah. I'm setting up, and I'm hearing this gathering, and I peek around, and there's like 300 kids. And I'm like, no. This is bad. This is real bad.
Oh, man.
So something happened. I don't know if it was raining or they didn't have something ahead of time. And they're like, well, the magician's coming out. They're like, one kid just started booing.
Oh.
And then it just picked up. I did 6.5 minutes of my 25 set. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't do this.
How old were you when this happened? This was
20,
like really early.
20, 21.
Okay, so really early on in your career.
Sure. Okay. And I mean, yeah, I guess they were expecting like a snake or a jaguar to come out. And I mean, like,
or something, because they weren't expecting me.
I'm just, because I mean, the idea, like, hey kids, the magician's coming out seems like, and hey kids, there's ice cream now. Like, they maybe you get out there and you're terrible, but like at the very least, I imagine the 300 kids would be excited. But I guess I don't know what they were promised.
Where things like, there's certain things you can't control. control.
Right.
Like
Sure.
we were doing an event once, not to go into too much detail. It was a lot of people, 1,500 people, and they were there to see a rock star.
Oh, yes.
And
a very famous rock star
from the 80s that did a lot of drugs, and the audience loved to do a lot of drugs too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
before they brought the rock star out, they've been waiting for 2 hours to see. They're like, we're going to bring a magician out.
Right.
And I had a straitjacket I put over my head and just got out of it for 10 minutes. I never looked at it. It was very
Yeah, that's not when you're the opening act, when they're not there to see you, that does stink, especially if drugs are involved.
I would say for your listeners, because now it sounds like we're terrible. Most of our material and most of our events go very well, and we enjoy what we do.
Most as in like 15.
No, that's not true.
No, I think, I mean, well, that's, again, our friend who's listening in, what they want to hear is the kind of stuff that we talk about when there isn't a mic rolling. And the truth is, you know, the stories where the show went fine, I'm not going to tell you guys that story. That's not a fun story. I want to tell you the story about where something horrible went wrong. So,
we have some of those. But.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I do want to talk about, I have never worked on a cruise ship. And I've been on enough cruises to sort of know the lay of the land, but I've never worked on one. So I'm curious, you know, Jason, it sounds like you started doing that pretty early, like even, I mean, before you guys were dating, you clearly were working that. And I know you just recently got back from a cruise tour again. So what are your sort of thoughts? Like, what's different and what's the same about performing out at sea versus one of your land-based shows?
So when I first started working on ships back in 2018, I was doing a single line that was, do you know what the term booze cruise? You know what a booze cruise is? 2 days out.
Oh, okay. No.
Drink.
Party ship. Small party
You
ship.
go out to go to a spot and come back, and it's usually a day or two.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I was a solo act at the time. It was a learning experience because you want to talk about, we were talking about audiences and stuff like that. I've had, you learn to deal with people differently on a ship. And the difference to your question is you live with these people.
Right.
So imagine being in a hotel that you have to go up on stage and bear everything that you have as a skill that you make a living. And then those people being there for like 9 days at every breakfast you have.
Yep.
Yeah.
Every, you know. And so what was interesting is when I first started, back to your thing about talking about the reality of what we do. When I first started, I didn't know how to do ships. And so my act, it was good. They kept booking me, but I wasn't great.
Okay.
And so I would do these shows and I'd stand next to the comedian and they'd come up, these people would come up and say, "Comedian, you're wonderful." And they'd look at me and go, and just walk away. And so
oh, nice.
The thing that's different that I like is it's a contained audience and it contains situations. So I was kind of able to look at it and say, like, what can I improve here? Like, what can we make different? That was the original ship it worked on. So we started back in October. Really getting back into it.
And now we're working with bigger lines where you're going out on, you know, you're going for the people on the ship are going on our particular ships are going out sometimes for 20, 30 days at a time. These are long cruises. We only stay on for about a week to 2 weeks.
The longest we've done is 15.
Yeah, we've done like 15 days, but that's exactly what Jason is saying. I would say the biggest difference between doing a show at home, like in a theater or for a corporate event versus the ship is, and I like this aspect, so it's not a bad thing, but it's different, is you're always on. You're always on. So the minute we walk out of our cabin room, you know, you have to look presentable and you have to engage with the clientele because one, you're going to have another show. You usually do 2 shows. So you want them to come back to your show. And you want them to like you and you want them to engage with you. You want people on the ship, the crew, to see you engaging with guests. And so, you know, we hang out at spots all over the ship and talk to people, go to events on the ship and support the other entertainers. And I really like that aspect of it.
The one thing what you're saying with being around these people, the thing that's interesting is if you do a public show on land and say it's wonderful, it's fantastic, people come and talk to you, or it's not so wonderful, people come and talk to you, but you talk to them for 5 minutes at a time. And that's the extent of it.
Yep.
You have to look at people in the face and see them every single day. If it was a great show, you have a certain reaction. If it's a mediocre show, you have a certain reaction.
Yeah.
I think I like the drive of like trying to do a really, really good good show every single time.
Mhm.
Because I don't look at people that think, it was all right.
Yeah, we
Right.
talk about that. Like we'll say, if we go do certain things on the ship by ourselves, he'll be like, oh, I had like 5 people stop me today. Like that's a good thing, right? Or I didn't have anyone stop me today. Like what do we need to be doing different in our next show? Because we want those people to come up and say like, oh, tell me more about, we talk a lot about ourselves in the show. So like where we're from and different parts of our story. And so we want people to come up and not only talk about the magic, but talk about us so that we can then ask them questions about them, right? And more about them. So we kind of take that and say, okay, what was good about it and what was not great about it.
That's a really interesting metric. I hadn't even thought about like the number of people who are talking to you after a show on the ship as your benchmark for, again, even if it was like you say, maybe that is the difference between good and great. Like if the show was good, they enjoyed it, they clapped, they're on their way. But the fact that they didn't feel the need to seek you out the next day or two, whereas, yeah, it is a lot more powerful, especially if someone comes up to you 3 days later and said, man, that thing that you did on Tuesday with the blah, 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 like that definitely cements in your mind that, okay, that's a piece that we need to keep, or that's definitely something that is a crowd favorite. So that's a cool, the fact that you're in that sort of workshop for a longer period of time than a land show is an interesting dynamic,
We've taken this different direction too. I love magic. I love tricks. There's millions of tricks to add. And so when we were like, we want people to talk about the tricks. And then we kind of switched over and said, if we can get them to come up to us and say something personal, how many of those things can we do? So I do a trick in the show and I talk about our dog. Our dog's name is Decolta.
Okay.
And so magic term, but we call her Colta on there. And all of a sudden, like I'd be in the elevator and people would be like, you going home to Colta?
Oh, right.
And that was the goal of like, so if someone comes up and goes, hey, I heard you're from Ohio, like like then we're doing a better show as opposed to, hey, I saw a magician that did a card trick.
Right. Yep. Yeah. No, and that is something, I mean, also, you guys are basically playing yourselves, but do you have there been any weird situations where somebody sort of, because you're always on and because the whole ship is the proscenium, do you get into any situations where, especially with mind reading, somebody wants to get a little demonstration or is asking you questions outside of the show space
so I haven't had it on the ship yet, but now that you said it, it will probably happen. Okay. Which is fine. I have had it happen at corporate events. So I don't know how much I want to get into it on the podcast, but for me personally, I do a lot of mentalism. I do some magic, but I do a lot of mentalism, and I have an ethical line where I'm pretty clear about the fact that what I'm doing is entertainment, right? This is fun. This is lighthearted. This is a skill that I've learned, right? Where some other people may pose it as something else, but that's not really how I do that.
You legally have.
Yeah, and I'm still actually a licensed therapist, and I still actually do a small bit of practice when I'm home. So I'm very cautious about blurring those lines and keeping those boundaries very, very clear. So when I'm working with someone on stage or even in a close-up setting, I want it to be fun. I don't want it to be real serious. I don't do like, psychic readings or mediums. I never claim to be able to do any of those things, but I have had people, I've told them the card they're thinking of, and after the show, they'll say, can you contact so-and-so, my deceased relative?
Right.
And I try to be really empathetic towards that and careful of how I approach that, because generally when someone is asking you that, there's a reason, right?
Sure.
They need something from that, and they're looking for something or they're missing someone. And I want to be really careful about how I approach that, because I don't want to undermine whatever they're feeling and reaching for, but I also don't want to give them anything false. Right. So I'm really careful with that, but that may be different for other performers. So I don't know how to answer that without stepping on toes.
No, yeah. I want to hear from you guys. I mean, that was a perfect answer.
For me,
because there's the discussion that a lot of mentalists have, like, do you give that statement at the beginning of the show?
Right.
Right. And so the way that we kind of do it, we open the show together. Stacy does this long bit, and I come out and I say, people ask us what that was, and I want you to know it's all bullshit.
Right.
Like, I literally say this. Like, we lie. Like, I'm literally lying to you right now, and so does she.
Sure.
And like, we directly say those terms and stuff because you do get that, and it's a rough, uncomfortable saying I don't get it as much because I'm pulling coins out of my ears.
Right. Yes, I haven't gotten it, but I also do wonder, like, if people, I mean, I don't seem like quite as as much of an empathetic person when I'm on stage. Like, I wonder if how Stacey comes across on stage in a good way is making people feel more comfortable in being able to sort of test the waters and ask, okay, well, if there was between the two of them, if there was one of them who was likely to contact a dead relative, it's probably Stacey,
So it's generally women who will ask me those questions, because on stage, I will say, if I'm working with men, I tend to be a little harsh, and it's a planned scenario. I'm playful with them in a way that's, how do I say this?
Well, you were playful now. We had to back it off.
Yeah.
Like, it was, her character was, we were going for harsh, kind of like not harsh, but like more. And you had one guy run off stage and someone said, "How did that feel?" He's like, "I felt like I was being waterboarded."
Yes.
Like, so we had to back it off.
Yeah.
Like,
but when I work with women, it's a different sense. So I play with some of those.
You're more on their side.
Roles. Yeah, I'm more on their side. I want them to be on my side. Where men, I want some of that gender tension. I want some of that, just the stereotypes and the things that we all kind of play into. I think that the men are more willing. It's weird, but I think that the men are more willing to do the things I want them to do on stage if I'm more direct and intense with them than if I'm empathetic and kind. I don't know if that makes sense, but whereas women, if I side with them and I join with them, then I'm going to get them to, I'm going to be able to control the volunteer a little bit more.
Right.
And with men, I feel like if I kind of show them that I'm the boss, then they tend to fall in line more with what I need them to do in that moment.
Right. No, that's fascinating. I mean, it is really tricky. Like, so much about what we do is audience management, and a lot of that basically is profiling. Like I'm looking at experiences that I've had in the past, and now I'm looking at this person who's in front of me, and I'm trying to apply some of the lessons that I've learned in the past to this person. And it is amazing how much that does translate, and how similar we all are,
I mean, I've done restaurant work for years.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you did was, if you walked up to a table and it looked like somebody was on a first date, a guy and a girl, we'll just go with a guy and girl in this situation.
Sure.
I would directly talk to the guy, have a conversation with him before you address, because
right.
You don't want it to look like, hey, like I'm the magician, like hitting, And so when you get someone on your side, then it becomes a communal thing, as opposed to like, hey, you're not involved with this. And that's what you try to.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. And it's kind of weird, because the way I get the gentleman on my side is to kind of be abrasive with them. Sure. And it's maybe just because it's a different interaction than they're used to, and they kind of like it. And I've had much more success with that. But I will say, like you said to Jason when we first started the podcast, did you get a magic hit when you were 7? Blah, blah, blah. My story coming into magic is so much different, and performing in general. I never was on a stage. I was never in theater. I never did any of these things. So it took me a long time to get comfortable on stage. And one of the hardest things for me was choosing volunteers. That was probably, learning the magic and being able to present it in a way that's entertaining is also very hard, but choosing volunteers that are going to give the audience a good show is really hard, because I would get so stuck in my head about scripting and what I was doing that I would forget to watch the audience as you're doing it. Because like you said, as you're doing your thing, you have to pay attention to who's responding, who's laughing, who's really engaged, because those are the people you want to bring up so that they can demonstrate that to the entire audience. And I would totally not look at anyone, and then I'd be like, oh wait, I have to choose someone now.
Yeah.
How do I do this? I was really bad at that for a long time.
Sure. That's another skill. It's another muscle that you have to practice. I mean, it's sort of like knowing someone's name on stage, like that happens all the time to, early beginners, where you're so focused on, or even, to me now, if it's a newer piece, like if you're so focused on the work at hand and you go through the formality of what's your name? Okay, great. But then that information immediately gets jettisoned. So you have
it evaporates from your mind. You're like, I don't remember their name.
It's cause you've got so much else going on, but yeah, working that muscle for sure, Well, this was fun, and we should do it again. So hopefully, we'll, stay tuned for more on a future episode with Jason and Stacy. For those of you who are not watching, if you're just listening in on this, there are a couple ways you can get in touch with Jason and Stacy and follow all their adventures. TheAllensLive.com is the website. And then also, if you head over to Instagram, it's also The Allen's Magic. And we should mention Alan in both cases is ALAN. So theallenslive.com or The Allen's Magic on Instagram. And also I know on your website, you can find the social media for both Jason and Stacy, and then The Allen's Magic on Insta is sort of your combined, for public shows, that sort of thing. That's the best way for folks to find more out about you. But yeah, this was great. And thank you to our listener. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Podcast of the Impossible. But to support my Museum of the Impossible project, as well as public shows, social media, and more, you can head on over to oftheimpossible.com. I'm Peter Wood. Thanks.